So let us continue. So we will talk about extreme empiricism. The epistemological position popularly attributed to Charvakas can be called extreme empiricism, according to which perception is the only pramana and the inference is not a pramana at all. In the history of Indian philosophy, it is not just Charvakas who deny pramanahood of inference. Like Charvakas, the philosophers of two other schools criticize inference as pramana. Bhartruhari of grammar school and Shankaracharya of non-dualist Vedanta school point out many intrinsic defects in reasoning or inference as the means to knowledge. But there is a difference between the Charvaka approach to inference and that of the other two. When Charvakas criticize inference, they weigh its strength against perception and not against verbal testimony. On the other hand, when Bhartruhari and Shankara criticize inference, they weigh it against verbal testimony, particularly the testimony of Vedas. Bhartruhari and Shankara pointed out the weaknesses of inference as pramana and assigned a limited role to it, namely that of supporting Vedic insights by reasons. Naturally, they expected that an inference is acceptable if it is not contradicted by Vedic authority. According to the view of the Charvaka, on the other hand, no special treatment needs to be given to verbal testimony. So here three terminological points of clarification are necessary when we talk about this extreme empiricist position of Charvakas. One is the strong and weak sense of the term pramana. Before we turn to understand the Charvaka criticism of inference as pramana, it is necessary to be clear on some points of terminology. Take for example the term pramana. Here the extreme empiricist Charvakas are using the word pramana in the strong sense of the term. The distinction between strong and weak sense of the term pramana is important in this context. The term pramana in its weak sense means to knowledge or instrument of knowledge. In this sense, we obtain knowledge, that is true cognition, through a pramana, but there is no guarantee that every cognition a pramana gives must be a true cognition. In the weak sense of the term, pramana is not understood as an authoritative means. Take for example instrument of perceptual knowledge as Naiyayikas understand it. According to them, for example, visual sense organ is pramana because we obtain veridical visual perception with the help of it. But visual sense organ does not always give veridical perception. With the same visual sense organ, we also sometimes have illusory cognition. Hence, we can say that visual sense organ is pramana in weak sense of the term. It is a means to knowledge, all right, but it is not. There is no guarantee that always it will give knowledge and it will never give pseudo knowledge. On the other hand, pramana in the strong sense of the term means an authority. It carries the sense of infallibility, which implies that a pramana cannot go wrong. For example, when Purvamimamsa philosophers talk about Vedas as pramana, they use the word pramana in the strong sense of the term. They mean thereby that Vedas are infallible. When Charvakas say that inference is not pramana, they use the word pramana in the strong sense. They mean thereby that inferences are not infallible. They probably do not deny that inference can sometimes give us true cognition. That is, it is a means to knowledge, it can give true cognition, but there is no guarantee that it will always give true cognition. For instance, they do not deny that if one sees smoke on the hill and infers that there must be fire, it is quite possible or probable that one will actually find fire if one goes there. What they are denying is that there is a necessity by which one must find the fire there. Another terminological question about the Charvaka criticism of inference is, what do Charvakas question about inference? Validity or validity of inference or its soundness? Many standard books on Indian philosophy written by well-known writers spread a misunderstanding about Charvakas, that when the latter criticize inference as pramana, they question the validity of inference. This misunderstanding is probably the consequence of a more general misunderstanding about the notion of anumana pramana, according to which it is translated as valid inference. Or in general, pramana is translated as valid means of knowledge, and hence inference is one of the pramanas, means inference is a valid means of knowledge, or valid inference is pramana, and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, the Charvaka criticism of Anumana questions soundness of Anumana, not its validity. In fact, it should have been kept in mind, at least when modern logic uses the word valid in a special sense, that the notion of pramana is primarily concerned with truth and not with validity. Here we have to note the distinction between validity and soundness. A valid inference is one the conclusion of which necessarily follows from its premises. Validity does not imply that premises of a valid argument must be true, nor does it imply that its conclusion must be true. It only implies the impossibility of its premises being true but conclusion false. A sound inference is the one which is not only valid but has true and only true premises. As a result, a sound inference is such that it necessarily yields a true conclusion. The Charvaka objection against inference as pramana is not primarily about validity of inference, but about the question whether a formally valid inference of a particular kind necessarily yields true conclusion. Even a valid inference may fail to yield a true conclusion if at least one of the premises is false. It is well known that Charvakas raise the question about truth of one of the premises, namely the statement of universal concomitance. That is, their criticism of Anumana as pramana centers on criticism of the truth of one of the premises, namely the statement of universal concomitance. Third clarification is about the terms Anuman and inference. It should also be noted that Charvaka criticism of inference as pramana should not be taken as their criticism of inference in general. The translation of the word Anumana as inference is misleading, because although just for the sake of convenience we have been using the word inference all the while, Anumana is a specific kind of inference. Inference could be inductive or deductive, and the latter two can be of various kinds. For instance, valid inferences in propositional logic and quantification logic differ from each other, and those in relational logic differ from both, though they overlap with each other to some extent. Anumana of Indian tradition would be close to Barbara of syllogistic logic, where all the three, that is two premises and the conclusion, are A propositions. In quantification logic, it would be close to the inference, the proof of which involves the rules like universal instantiation, modus ponens and modus tollens. In an inference of this kind, one of the premises is a universally general statement, which is the analog of the statement of universal concomitance, that is Vyapti, in the inference for others, Parartha Anumana. So Charvaka criticism pertains to this type of inference. It is the criticism of a specific type of inductive inference which is based on inductive generalization. So now we come to the Charvaka criticism of inference. Philosophically, Charvaka criticism of inference can be divided into two parts. One, dilemma of inference. Charvakas raise a dilemma which renders inference as problematic. And B, arguments against universal concomitance. Charvakas point out how universal concomitance, which is the basis of any inference, cannot be ascertained. Though the above two parts are interconnected, each one of them has a distinct conceptual pattern, and hence it is elegant and also convenient to discuss them separately. Now, dilemma of inference. Jayanta Bhatta's version, as he presents in Nyaya Manjari. He says, where is the case of inference? Because in the case of particular, there is no connection. In the case of universal, there is redundancy, and a particular qualified by universal is not tenable. So, three alternative he takes into account, that what is proved after all by inference is some particular, for example, in smoke fire case, is a particular fire inferred, or a fire in general, universal fire inferred, or a particular fire characterized by universal fireness, that is inferred. So this version can be understood as a trilemma, which raises three alternatives regarding the object of inference. The question raised here is whether the object of inference is a particular or a universal, or a particular characterized by a universal. Charvakas point out that every alternative is riddled with some difficulty. This can be explained with reference to the inference of fire from smoke. If what we want to infer is a particular fire item, say fire on the hill, then the problem is that it has no connection with other fire items, for example, the one in the kitchen, on the basis of which we can arrive at the knowledge of the former from that of the latter. So, all these particulars, as it were, are discrete particulars. You cannot go from one particular to the other particular. This is one objection. If particular fire item is to be proved. Suppose somebody says that it is not particular fire item but universal fire, fire in general, or fireness, that we are inferring. But then the so-called fire in general is already established. So, that is not the issue at all to prove the fire in general. What we want to establish actually is the particular fire which is on the mountain. Hence, it is redundant to prove it again. At this stage, the opponent may come out with the third alternative, that what we prove is not just a particular fire item nor universal fire, but a particular fire item as characterized by the universal fireness. On this, Charvakas are saying that the particular characterized by universal is untenable, because there is no real thing called universal fire. So, just as according to Buddhists there is no samanya, there are no universals, real universals, Charvakas also in that particular context say that there is no samanya as such, there is no real samanya, and therefore there is no real fireness which we can characterize the particular fire. Out of the three alternatives and three corresponding objections raised by the Charvakas, the first one is most important. The opponents of Charvakas believe in the pramanahood of inference because they believe that the discrete cases of smoke and fire, whether on the hill or in the kitchen, are well connected by the relation called invariable concomitance or pervasion, avinabhava or vyapti. These relations not only exist, but they also can be known and ascertained by us. The extreme empiricist Charvakas are raising doubts about the availability and knowability of such connections. So, we come to Charvakas' arguments against universal concomitance. In the development of the theory of inference, universal concomitance, vyapti, between reason property and target property was accepted as the ground of inferential knowledge by all the systems which accepted inference as pramana. As against this, Charvakas argue that universal concomitance cannot be ascertained. The Charvakas' argument can be formulated in two stages. First stage, there probably are no laws of nature at all. So, they are questioning what we can call uniformity of nature. And second stage, even if there are laws of nature, they cannot be known for certain. So, there are no laws of nature. Those who accept inference as pramana presume that there is absolute regularity in nature. The idea behind this is that all things in this world have their own nature or essence. They function and interact with each other according to their essential nature, according to their essential natures. This is a minimalistic causal explanation of the world which Charvaka is denying here. Here they are pointing out that the so-called capacities of things or essences of things change with the change in space, time and states of things. This seems to be the position of accidentalist camp of Charvakas, that is Yadruchhavadin, who deny even cause-effect relationship, who would question the belief in the uniformity of nature. This is the initial position presented as a provisional position. Now second stage is that even if there are laws of nature, we cannot know them for certain. At this stage, the Charvakas accept for the sake of argument that there are laws of nature. The question that they now raise is whether one can know any such law for certain. A law of nature would generally assume the form of an invariable or necessary relation between two types of things or events, such that if alpha type of thing or event occurs, beta type of thing or event must occur or must have occurred in past or will occur in future. I mean, when it depends on the type of relation we are talking about. Such a relation is said to hold, for example, between smoke and fire. All Indian philosophical systems except Charvaka Darshana believe that such a relation holds between smoke and fire and that it can be known for certain. Systems differ in their explanation of the exact nature of this relation and the way the relation is known. For Buddhism, it is essentially a causal relation or the relation of identity if it is between two aspects of one and the same thing. That is, if it is between two different things, then it is the relation of causality. If it is between two aspects of one and the same thing, then it is a relation of identity. For other systems, the relation of invariable concomitance need not be restricted to causal relation and identity relation. However, they try to explain the invariable concomitance relation in some other ways. Hence, different conceptions of pervasion were presented by Naiyayikas as, for example, sometimes they use the language of avyabhicharita sambandha, that is non-deviant relation. That is, this reason property does not deviate from the target property. That is, reason property is not there without target property. This is the kind of relation, that's all. Then sometimes they talk of natural relation, swabhavika sambandha. Then sometimes they use the language of unconditioned relation, nirupadhika sambandha. Upadhi means condition. That is, hetu is unconditionally related with sadhya, or reason property is unconditionally related with target property. You cannot say that if the reason property is there, then okay, target property will be there, but under such and such conditions. If you start putting such conditions, then that means that there is no invariable relation between the reason property and the target property. So if it is unconditional, nirupadhika, then it can be an invariable relation. And sometimes they use the language of having common locus, samanadhikaranya, particularly in Navya Nyaya, that is later development of Nyaya. This invariable concomitance was defined in terms of samanadhikaranya, means having the same locus. Of course, with many qualifications. I mean, they did not just say samanadhikaranya, that is having the same locus is invariable concomitance, but under such and such conditions, if this reason property fulfills such and such conditions, then we will not go into that. Similarly, different systems suggested different ways of ascertaining the relation. In fact, this was a problem before these systems of philosophy. Although these systems accepted inference as pramana, there was no provision in their pramana systems to incorporate the knowledge of universal concomitance. Hence, the question was that of adjusting this type of knowledge within the available pramana scheme, or to amend the pramana scheme accordingly. Hence, different systems came out with different proposals. Purva Mimamsa system talked about ordinary perception as the means to the knowledge of universal concomitance, and there they talked about repeated perception, bhuyo darshana. So, if you repeatedly see, just by seeing once or twice is not sufficient, that is smoke and fire I saw together, that is not sufficient, you have to see repeatedly. Then on the basis of repeated perception, you can ascertain the relation between smoke and fire. Then Nyaya talked of extraordinary perception, which we have seen a kind of alaukika pratyaksha based on samanya lakshana pratyasatti, where universal itself plays the role of the contact between sense organ and object, and that contact is regarded as extraordinary contact. Of course, all Nayayikas did not say that extraordinary perception is the means. In addition to extraordinary perception, again observation and non-observation, observing the two properties together and not observing the reason property without target property, that also should be there. On the basis of all these, we can ascertain the invariable concomitance. Some Nyaya scholars, particularly Jayanta in his Nyaya Manjari, talked about mental perception, that is Manasa Pratyaksha, as the means to the knowledge of invariable concomitance, because he found that just external perception of smoke and fire together is not sufficient. We have to have some kind of intuition, some kind of mental perception, and through that mental perception only we can know. Then Jainism accepted an independent pramana called Tarka, that we have seen yesterday, that according to them Tarka is an independent pramana, because they found that the available pramanas cannot give the knowledge of universal concomitance, so we have to postulate a new pramana, and therefore they postulated Tarka as that pramana. In Buddhism, we find that Dharmakirti particularly talked about determination through necessity, avinabhava niyama, as a means to the ascertainment of invariable concomitance. Now let us briefly consider how Charvakas responded or can respond to these proposals. Ordinary perception, repeated perception, bhuyo darshana. According to this view, one can ascertain invariable concomitance relation between smoke and fire if one has perceived smoke with fire several times but has not seen smoke without fire. This view is held by Mimamsakas and Nayayikas with some variation. As against this, the Charvakas point out that even if one observes smoke 100 times with fire and never sees smoke without fire, one cannot rule out the possibility that in say 101th case that smoke may exist without fire. By repeated observation, one at the most gets a high probability of smoke existing with fire, but no necessity in it. For knowing fire for certain on the basis of smoke, what one needs is the ascertainment of a necessary relation between them, but that is not possible. This is the gist of the Charvaka skepticism about the knowledge of universal concomitance. It highlights the basic limitations of human knowledge concerning the laws of nature. Now, extraordinary perception, alaukika pratyaksha, which was proposed by Nayayikas. The problem with the proposal of repeated observation and non-observation of deviation is that, after all, observation can give us particular cases of coexistence of reason property and target property. It cannot give us the knowledge of all cases of coexistence. To make room for the knowledge of all objects of a kind, Nayayikas introduced a kind of extraordinary perception which gives the knowledge of all smokes through the universal smokeness residing in a single smoke. This we have seen in the first lecture itself. According to Nayayikas, if we know all smokes and all fires through an extraordinary perception, then the knowledge of the universal truth, wherever there is smoke, there is fire, will become possible. It can be doubted, however, whether a satisfactory explanation of the knowledge of universal concomitance can be given by taking recourse to extraordinary perception of the above kind. By universal based extraordinary perception, if at all it makes sense to say that it is a kind of genuine veridical perception, one can perhaps know all smokes and all fires. So they also say that through this kind of extraordinary, Nayayikas say that through this kind of extraordinary perception, when I know all smokes, I know all smokes only insofar as their universal characteristic, namely smokeness, is concerned. Over and above smokeness, I cannot know any additional I cannot have any additional information. Any other specific characteristics of smokes I cannot know. I can know only all smokes insofar as they are smokes. Nothing beyond that. Similarly, all fires insofar as they are fire. No additional characteristic of smoke and fire I can know through this particular type of extraordinary perception. So, one will not know whether all these smokes are accompanied by fire or preceded by fire. Similarly, one will not know that there is a necessary relation between smoke and fire, such that smoke cannot exist without fire. And unless one knows these things, one cannot be said to have known the invariable relation between smoke and fire. So just knowing all smokes as smokes, all fires as fire, is not sufficient for knowing the invariable relation between smokes and fires. Now we come to third proposal coming from Jayanta, that a kind of mental perception, or which we can call intuition, Manasa Pratyaksha, is the means to the ascertainment of pervasion or invariable concomitance. The Nyaya logician Jayanta Bhatta regarded mental perception as the means to the ascertainment of universal concomitance. This proposal has to face a similar problem as the proposal of extraordinary perception. The so-called intuitive grasp or mental perception of universal concomitance will not have necessity and objectivity that one expects from pramana. That is, intuition will be, after all, my intuition, and it can be wrong also. For example, suppose I see smoke and fire together 100 times, and on the basis of that, somebody may develop an intuition that where there is smoke, there must be fire. It is possible that some other person may develop an intuition that where there is fire, there is smoke, on the basis of the same set of observations. Whereas one intuition is true, but the other intuition is false. That is, wherever there is fire, there is smoke. This intuition will be wrong. But if you just depend upon the intuition or mental perception, then you cannot decide as to which mental perception must be true and which must be false. So it will remain a subjective intuition, and it will not have any objectivity. Now, Jaina proposal that there must be some independent pramana, namely tarka, on the basis of which we can ascertain this relation. We have seen in yesterday's talk that Jainas suggested that generalization, that is tarka, should be accepted as an independent pramana through which we know general truths such as the relation of universal concomitance. The contribution of Jainas to the debate on the knowledge of universal pervasion lies in their realization that the knowledge of pervasion cannot be subsumed under the traditionally accepted framework of pramanas, and if at all universal pervasion is knowable through a pramana, then a different pramana will have to be accepted for that. So up to that, I think Jainas are right, but here the question is Given that in smoke fire case one has observed smoke only with fire and never without fire, how does tarka, which is an independent pramana, lead one to the universal and necessary statement that wherever there is smoke there is fire? Jainas do not give any explanation of this. Hence, the logical status of tarka as pramana remains unclear. Determination through necessity, Avinabhava Niyama, which is Dharmakirti's proposal. We have seen in the third lecture that according to Dharmakirti, the law of invariable relation is mentally constructed by us on the basis of necessity in the form of causation or identity. Though this mental construction is the basis of Anumana Pramana, Dharmakirti does not give it the status of Pramana because there are difficulties in doing that. That is, Avinabhava Niyama is necessary. Ascertainment of Avinabhava Niyama is necessary. There is ascertainment of invariable concomitance, and that is possible only through causation or identity. But now the knowledge of causation, the knowledge of identity, what is the status of that in terms of pramana? Can we give the status can we give the status of perception to it? Can we give the status of inference to it? Because perception and inference are the only two pramanas. The cognition of universal concomitance is a conceptual cognition. Hence, it cannot be subsumed under perception. Perception, because it is a universal, it is the knowledge of a universal law. So, it is the knowledge of universals. It is conceptual, and therefore, it cannot be perceptual. So, perception is a non-conceptual cognition, and therefore, it cannot be perceptual. It cannot be subsumed under inference also, because inferential knowledge is based on the cognition of universal concomitance. If the latter is regarded as inferential cognition again, then it will have to be based on another cognition of universal concomitance. And this will go on ad infinitum. That is, inferential knowledge is based on the law of causation, for example, which gives us the universal concomitance. But this law of causation itself, if it is regarded as inference, then that knowledge of that inferential knowledge should be based on the knowledge of another invariable concomitance. If that invariable concomitance must be either of the nature of identity or causation. If that is again regarded as inferential cognition, then that should be based on another invariable concomitance. So, it will go on ad infinitum, and we will never reach inferential knowledge. And there is no third pramana according to Dharmakirti. Only perception or inference, and there is no third pramana. So, the cognition of universal concomitance cannot be subsumed under any pramana in Dharmakirti's framework. Though Dharmakirti in this way could not regard cognition of universal concomitance as a pramana type of cognition, he attached a great importance to it as a necessary condition of inferential knowledge. He added further that this universal concomitance can be established on the basis of identity or causality. Hence, the cognition of identity does not pose a big problem. Here, the cognition of identity does not pose a big problem. It can be understood in terms of the cognition of analytic truths. If we understand what is to be a banyan, we also understand that to be a tree is contained in it. Hence, we can ascertain the universal statement all banyans are trees without observing many banyan trees. But the main question is about ascertainment of causal relation. Can Buddhists really get rid of observation and non-observation while explaining the ascertainment of universal relation based on causality? Dharmakirti says that Avinabhava, that is invariable concomitance, can be established not on the basis of observation and non-observation, but on the basis of either causation or identity. But now, how is causation established? at that level we have to talk about observation and non-observation. To ascertain the relation of causal necessity between two objects, the Buddhists after Dharmakirti, because I don't know whether Dharmakirti himself talks about these steps that I am going to talk about. Buddhists after Dharmakirti applied a test consisting of 5 steps. Non-perception of an effect prior to its production, perception of the cause. So when we just observe that there is fire and smoke is coming out of it, you keenly observe that at a point of time there is only fire, there is no smoke. So non-perception of an effect prior to its production. Then we see fire, perception of the cause. The appearance of the effect in immediate succession. So we see fire, at the next moment we see smoke. Then disappearance of the cause. Now at the very next moment that fire is not there. I mean, new fire may be there, but that fire ceases when it produces smoke. And after that there is disappearance of the effect also in immediate succession. So at the next moment the smoke is also not there. So by this observation we can see how fire produces smoke. So how a particular cause produces effect. So these 5 perceptions and non-perceptions are useful, or they lead to the knowledge of cause-effect relation in a particular case, according to Dharmakirtiyans, I will say. I don't know whether Dharmakirti himself talks about that, because in later literature we find this idea of 5 observations and non-observations. This is obviously the method of observation and non-observation, and it pertains to arising of a particular effect from a particular cause. So the question remains how one can arrive at a statement of universal causal relation on the basis of observation of a particular case. So this observation non-observation method applies to a particular event in which, say, smoke arises from fire. But what we want is the universal law: wherever there is smoke, there is fire. All smokes are caused by fire. How can we arrive at this universal statement? Hence, different proposals of explaining the knowledge of universal concomitants rest on the method of repeated observation of reason property and target property together, and non-observation of reason property without target property. Against this, the Charvakas have rightly pointed out that even if one observes smoke 100 times with fire and never sees smoke without fire, one cannot rule out the possibility that smoke may exist without fire. Now, the Charvaka skepticism about the knowledge of universal concomitants closely resembles Hume's skepticism about induction. Hume's theory of induction has 2 aspects, negative and positive. The problem of induction constitutes the negative aspect of his theory. The positive element in Hume's theory was that his introduction of the notion of probability, which acquired importance in due course as a part of scientific method. The germs of the theory of probability are also found in the Charvaka criticism of inference. Of course, there are references which I have given in my book, but you need not, I have not given them here. A difficulty in the extreme empiricist epistemology of Charvakas. It is generally held that the extreme empiricism of Charvakas supports their, so I am coming to the limitations of the extreme empiricism. It is generally held that the extreme empiricism of Charvakas supports their materialist ontology. But this can be doubted. For example, it can be asked whether through perception we see material things or we only cognize qualia or sense data on the basis of which we infer or mentally construct the existence of material objects. Hence, it can be argued that the extreme empiricist epistemology of Charvakas, if extended to its logical end, leads to phenomenalism rather than materialism. Moreover, Charvakas also advocate the materialist thesis, according to which consciousness cannot exist independently of matter but it arises from matter. This thesis is a matter of inference and cannot be established merely on the basis of perception. In fact, the position of extreme empiricist Charvakas leads to a dilemma. If perception alone is accepted as pramana, then the statements regarding God, other worlds, etc. can be rejected. But the materialist thesis will also have to be rejected. If, on the other hand, perception along with inference is accepted as pramana, then the materialist thesis can be defended, but the arguments for metaphysical entities such as God and soul will also have to be accepted. This underlines the need for a more accommodative and yet stronger epistemology which will preserve its negative or destructive elements with regard to transcendental metaphysics, but will be more constructive with respect to this worldly approach to reality. Such an epistemology assumes two forms, which we are going to discuss tomorrow, not day after tomorrow, sorry. Verificationist epistemology of more learned, that is Sushikshitar Charvakas, as referred to by Jayanta Bhatta, and common sense epistemology of Purandara, as mentioned by Kamalashila. This brings us to what can be called the position of a mitigated empiricist Charvaka, which we will discuss in the last talk. Thank you.